Let's talk about your Kendi critique. Now, what I noticed when I was reading it is that it was very much kind of a logic based critique, that you thought it was his works were lacking rigor and lacking kind of logical connections. And you kind of categorized different logical, missteps that he took and kind of described them. Would that be an accurate way of describing your critique, do you think?
Uh, I think as a concise summary, that kind of captures the essence of it. But I also don't want to shortchange Kendi's arguments or framework, because I don't, by invoking logical fallacies, which is sort of three generally that I use to anchor the discussion of his work. By identifying these particular fallacies, I don't want to simply say I dismiss all his work because he makes arguments that succumb to three essential or succumb to these fallacies, and that sort of undermines his whole work. So I don't want to imply that he's an illogical thinker. But I think that the logical fallacies that I identify help to raise questions about his work that, I would argue, necessitate some further inquiry, or that further inquiry would be helpful. I think that, there's a little bit of a doctrinaire element in the work, and perhaps as a result of how directly and concisely and simply he defines the dichotomy between racist and anti-racist. It might just be a result of that. But I do think that there are complexities that might easily get bypassed, and invoking or identifying these fallacies as a way of trying to explore those complexities.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the racist anti-racist dichotomy you were just describing. So tell us a little bit about what is your major issue with that dichotomy.
I think the main one is essentially that he doesn't have a lot of regard for the notion of not racist. So you are either racist or anti-racist. And there is no real such, I think he actually says verbatim at one point or various points that there is no such thing as not racist. So that's one. And another issue is just that, his argument, his definition of them depend on basically the notion of policy. And so, the basic idea is racist policy leads to racial inequality and racist ideas and that sort of thing. And, he certainly attempts to identify and explain various policies throughout history that have, as he argues, led to racial inequality. And, you get this tone, not necessarily of belligerence, which you would see in D'Angelo's work, but kind of in intransigence, where, it's just perfectly obvious, it would seem, or at least that seems to be the underlying message, that this policy had a, well, I don't know if it had he does seem to say that it had the intent of in creating racial inequality. That gets us down into the nitty gritty of intent versus design and consequences and so on. Mm-hmm. But to summarize, it doesn't make any room for not racist. And he has a very particular definition of what racist, anti-racist is, which has merit to it. I don't disagree with, the idea that policies can have racially unequal effects. But I do think that, and this is perhaps anticipating further discussion, that it's not necessarily a one-way street where policy leads to racist ideas, that there can be some, interplay there, and that sort of gets into the endogeneity issue. But yeah, like if I envision a Venn diagram, you have racist, anti-racist, and not racist. And so I get this right. So uh, you can have intersection between um, racist and or anti-racist and not racist. So you can be not racist but not anti-racist according to his uh, definition. You can be uh, anti-racist and do everything you're supposed to be anti-racist. And so, I guess by the parameters of his definition, you're not no longer quote unquote not racist. I mean, we could explore that, but basically, I do think that there is a distinction that can be made between anti-racist and not racist.
Okay,
And so I
well,
do,
let's dig into that, man. Let's dig into that a little
yeah,
bit because,
sure,
obviously, as you said, Kendi doesn't believe that not racist is really a thing. So
right,
it's a thing to you. So why don't you, since you have the floor here, why don't you tell us what it means to you to be not racist?
yeah. So simply, I'm just invoking sort of, I don't know whether it would be people like Kendi or whiteness scholars in general or critical race. I don't know how you would describe the people making the argument, but um, the what they might call old-fashioned racism uh, is just the idea that you have this antipathy to uh, an identifiable other, somebody. You don't like somebody or you're prejudiced against somebody on the basis of ethnicity, race, um, or whatever. And being not racist is to not have that antipathy, or to not simply be inclined to overtly discriminate on the basis of racist race or ethnicity. And I think it's important to make that distinction because, in contrast or in conjunction, I suppose, with anti-racist, for Kendi, you need to be actively working to undo racial inequality. That's what makes you an anti-racist. So you need to be supporting, promoting policies uh, that undo or that combat racial inequality. And that in itself, by itself, is perfectly fine. The issue is that disagreements can arise about what the best policies are to do that.
Hmm.
If we take one of his signature policy platforms, it would be like reparations.
Hmm.
And if you don't support reparations, you're basically not being anti-racist. And um, in principle, I can follow the argument, but in practice, there's all sorts of different ways to go about thinking about reparations and what it means and what types of policies are the best way to do that. And so, what I fear with the uh, racist anti-racist dichotomy, putting aside not racist as a I guess just a non-entity or something that just doesn't exist according to Kendi. It has the potential to wrongfully put you in a racist camp when you disagree with Kendi about what the best policy, anti-racist policy would be. It's also just the case that, practically speaking, on a normal, you know, everyday basis, people are, they're doing their normal things in life, taking care of their responsibilities, going to their jobs, taking care of their families, and doing their thing. And you know, to what extent are you not being sufficiently anti-racist because you just don't have the time or energy to, I guess, sufficiently support or actively support? I mean, if you don't go to a protest, does that make you racist? That's probably stretching it a little bit, but it's just an example that comes to mind. So what it does is it just kind of glosses over the legitimate disagreements that people can have about what is sufficiently anti-racist. And I think that I think that you do have to make room for the simple position that uh, not being overtly bigoted towards people or prejudiced on the basis of um, race, ethnicity, gender, whatever. I think that it's a legitimate It's an easily identifiable position. So that's I guess the problem I have with the racist anti-racist dichotomy as he formulates it.
Thanks for watching. For access to the full-length conversation and all of the 2-hour-long unedited conversations that I've had on race, click the support link in the description below. Thanks for your support and see you next time.